Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. We are in Habakkuk chapter 1, looking at verses 1 through 4 tonight. Verse 1 is the introduction, the oracle that Habakkuk, the prophet, received. We'll look at that verse. And then it's got what is titled in your NIV text, or maybe in your Bible, your translations, his first complaint. He's basically going to have two comments to the Lord. This is the first one, verses 2, 3, and 4. That's what we'll look at tonight. And then the Lord responds in verse 5 through 11 to his first kind of complaint. And his complaint is basically, I live in a wicked society. When are you going to do something to intervene and correct this? There's people being, mistreated. It's terrible here. And the answer God gives is going to be shocking, because God's not going to intervene. He's going to find a worse people to come in and bring judgment for him, which is going to judge the entire land. It's not going to be the Lord, in a sense, bringing judgment and judging the guilty and rewarding the faithful. The entire land is going to be judged, which means there's going to be no sifting of the wheat from the chaff or the dividing of the sheep from the goats by Nebuchadnezzar necessarily, although we do have in Jeremiah's case the good figs going into captivity, the second captivity, and the bad figs staying. So we could disagree with that statement. But it's not what Habakkuk wants to hear. And then he begins in chapter 1, verse 12, and then calls on the carriage of God. Says, "O Lord, are you not from everlasting? Are you not the Holy One?" And it's like, well, that doesn't even seem right. And then God is going to say to him in chapter 2, verse 2, he's going to give his second answer. And in that second answer, it says, "Then the Lord replied," chapter 2, verse 2, "Write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets." We're way ahead in chapter 2, verse 2, "so that a herald may run with it." So what we see there, and I wanted to point this out, is writing. That you said you spell writing, correct? Yes. It's writing, right? I get confused with doubling the T and adding the E, dropping the E, and all that stuff. I'm not very good. I wish I was better at spelling and language, especially being a Bible teacher. But write down the Revelation chapter 2, verse 2, and make it plain on tablets so that a herald may run with it. Now, writing, as we know from the ancient world, was developed a lot earlier than they thought in the late 1800s. In the late 1800s, they began to realize that the cuneiform writing had been around, in 2000 BC. There was cuneiform writing, and we'll look at that. That's the wedge shape, right? That cuneiform means wedge shape. And even going back before that, they've even found some script in the 3500 BC. They found script. Sometimes it's pictures, but it's also moving into some kind of a lettering. So this was, and we see this in Samaria, not Samaria in northern Israel, but the Samaria over Mesopotamia. Where the Chaldeans, the Babylonians are going to come from. We clearly see the Assyrians writing. Egypt had developed a writing. And sometime during this time, the Hebrew language began to be written down. It may have been the first language written down. I just bought a couple books, one about the ancient Chinese, or not the ancient, but the Chinese lettering and how ancient it is and where it comes from. And so I'm going to be doing some more reading on the letters and the formation of language. It's always interesting. But by the time Habakkuk comes, and we're looking at Habakkuk, right around 606, 609, we'll just write 606 BC. That's a fair estimate, 609 BC. Writing was clearly developed. So when it says, write down the revelation, make it plain on tablets, we know that was not impossible. In fact, you go back to 700 or 701 BC, we've got record of Hezekiah writing letters to, Isaiah the prophet writing letters to Hezekiah the king, and this going back and forth. We have things being written by Sennacherib and sent to be read to the people on the wall, and a copy was given to the people, the elders, the leaders of Israel, in the Assyrian script, possibly in the Hebrew script, because they would have, ambassadors that could speak different languages. Daniel would be one of those ambassadors over in Babylon. He would know Hebrew, but he would also pick up on Aramaic. I'm sure he would become familiar with the cuneiform writing of the Assyrians. Because he was a scribe. He was a trained person. He was educated in the wisdom of the Babylonians. And what I brought tonight, just to show you some things, going back to Isaiah and Hezekiah writing, there's been around for many years the bula of Hezekiah. Like there would be like his signet ring. He would be able to leave an impression in clay. And we've talked about that before, where they'd roll up their documents, like it'd be parchment or some kind of writing material. They'd put a drop of clay on it, then he'd press his ring in it to seal the document. Jeremiah records where they would take, when he would buy a field, there would be a document that would be sealed and put in the temple or put in the archive, and then he would have a copy of it at home. So he'd be able to unroll and say, this is what the document says. If there's ever a case, there would be one that was sealed, that if they ever had a court case, they could break the seal and read the original document that had been sealed by someone that was a witness, an eyewitness. Jeremiah does this. This is, for example, a bula is that piece of clay that sealed the document. So when the documents were destroyed, burnt, decayed, the clay bula that had the impression in it would remain. And if it was a fire, it'd be glazed, it'd be turned into some kind of permanent, solid piece of rock. And this is, I've got some actual bula at home. I didn't bring them because I've got other things that I brought. This is the Isaiah bula. It was found, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago on the south side of the Temple Mount, and just a few feet from Hezekiah bula. There's several bula laying there, meaning there had been official documents that had been burnt. It is in one of the chambers of the gate area where documents probably would have been kept. It would be north of the city of David, just south of the temple. But this was found along with bula of Hezekiah. And I've got these are replicas. These are not artifacts. These are replicas. These are not real. In fact, this replica is not even very good. I'm very kind of disappointed in the way it looks, because when you look at the actual one, get a big picture of it, look at this, it's like, come on. If you're going to sell me a replica, at least make, and again, I knew it was a replica when I bought it. You can buy these. There's a place online. Just look up Bible replicas or something like that, and you can find. This is amazingly, just on the topic here, this is a little kit, little set of 4 kings. It's got Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, and Manasseh. Their bula. These are all actually been found. These are replicas, but these have been found. So you start with. Are you ready? Are you ready for this? They have found bula of these people. These are replicas of the actual ones that they have found. Jotham, they found his signature pressed into clay. Ahaz, they found his signature from his signet ring pressed in clay. They have found several of Hezekiah's. They found one for the first time in a scientific excavation about 3 or 4 years ago. In the same excavation, they found this Isaiah bula. So we got the prophet Isaiah and Hezekiah bula found in a scientific excavation. And then we've got a Manasseh bula. So these 4 kings of the tribe of David, these are, again, replicas. So you can pass those around and look at them to get to see the kings. This is the Isaiah. It's just stuck on there because it's got the king in a little pad. But that was actually found. It's missing what it says. It says on there, it's got on the top half, it's got a doe standing there, a deer standing there, maybe grazing or something. You can see the legs of it. Like I said, that's not a very good copy. And then on the bottom it says Isaiah, clearly says Isaiah, and then it says the prophet. And again, the word, in the Hebrew, the first letter of the word prophet is only partially there, so you're not real sure what it is, but there's only one word that would make sense, or one letter that would make it into a word, that's the word prophet. So there's really no doubt it says Isaiah the prophet. It'd be like taking the P and dropping it off and saying it says Raphat, but there's a letter missing. Then you got to figure out, in the alphabet, is it Prophet, Kafit? It's like no, there's not a word that would make sense. So that's Isaiah the prophet. Those are replicas. Another thing that we found, when I say we, I'm talking about research Christians that are interested, archaeologists that are interested in these things, is Ostrakon. During the fall of Babylon, or fall of Jerusalem by Babylon, by Nebuchadnezzar, as he was invading and during the siege, they were writing letters from Jerusalem to Lachish, because Lachish was under attack. Lachish was in contact with Ezekiel, and in one of those communications it says we can no longer see the lights of Ezekiel. The light, we can't see it any longer. Meaning they were signaling back and forth during this invasion, because they would have communication, like we'd text or something. They'd use some kind of flashing light system with their torches or lights that they would have fire. And during the invasion, all of a sudden the lights go out and communication has stopped. It's like the Titanic sinking. We've lost communication. And they said on one of these communications back to Jerusalem, we've lost communication with Ezekiel, and Lachish is left. Also on those communications, they found him in the guardhouse of Lachish. When they were excavating Lachish, they found him in the guardhouse. In the heat of the battle, they were just buried, these communications. There's a mention of the prophet on there. And the prophet, and it not saying negative things. It doesn't say the prophet Jeremiah, but it would have been during this 586 BC when Nebuchadnezzar destroys Jerusalem. So we've got prophets Zephaniah, Habakkuk, we've got Jeremiah that are saying negative things. And Jeremiah definitely was in prison at the time for being negative, not being patriotic. And it mentions something about the prophet on those. Those communications were on what we call ostrakons. Ostrakons. And ostrakons are basically, these are authentic now. These are authentic potsherds. I picked these up myself. These both came from Hatzor, and these are broken pottery. And so what a potsherd would be, this is a potsherd, a broken pot. But when they would take, and you can see how smooth this one is. Some of them there's designs on. I'll show you another one that's got some art on it. Very little art. But they would write on this, kind of like a sticky note. They would write, and they've got ink inscriptions. Once you write on this, and it's found, it's called an ostrakon. These are potsherds. I do not have an ostrakon. I'd love to have an ostrakon. That would be some kind of Hebrew inscription or some kind of ink inscription. It wouldn't be pressed in while it was wet, because it was hardened to be a pot, but when it broke, it's like, well, let's write on this. And there was like 7 or 8 or 9 potsherds left in the guardhouse, and on there were writing about the battle that they were facing with Nebuchadnezzar, including the comment about Ezekiel. Now these are actual potsherds. It says on the back, Hatzor, where I found them in Hatzor, picked them up in Hatzor. That's in northern Israel. Here's another, the closest thing I've got to an ostrakon would be this piece right here. This is I picked this up in Beth Shemesh, which Beth Shemesh is the city in the valley of Elah, southwest of Jerusalem, and the valley runs right into Gath and the Philistine cities. In fact, when they put the Ark of the Covenant on the cart with the ox or the cows that pulled it right to Beth Shemesh, which was a Levitical city, right to the Levites, and that's where they received the Ark of the Covenant. So that's where this piece was found. On this potsherd, there's some kind of ink inscription on this, some kind of writing on this. Again, it's probably part of the original pot, I'm not sure, but that's got some decoration on it. Okay, that I've showed you 2 things. You've got some kind of scrolls that were written on that were sealed with bula. You've got ostrakon. I didn't show you one, but I described it. What's interesting in chapter 2, and I'll mention this again when we get there in 4 months, but Habakkuk is being told by the Lord after Habakkuk complained the first time, the Lord answered him. Habakkuk challenges God again. I don't understand this. God responds the second time with apparently new revelation or new information. And he says to him, chapter 2, verse 2, then the Lord replied, write down the revelation. What revelation? Well, the revelation I'm about to give you. Write this down. It's no different than John being told, write down everything that you see. Or Ezekiel writing down the things that he was shown. But he says, write down the revelation. And to watch this right here, and make it plain on tablets. Now, an ostrakon is a broken piece of pottery. It's not a tablet, so that's not what he's writing on. A tablet is not a scroll or parchment. He could have written on that. We know Isaiah would have wrote on that. We know Jeremiah wrote on that. because when he sent it to the king tore off part of it, threw it in the fire. They unrolled a little more, read it, cut it off, threw it in the fire, probably using a scribe's knife to cut it off. This is a tablet, and a tablet would be, interestingly, when Nebuchadnezzar burnt Jerusalem in 586 BC, he wrote on a tablet. This is in the British Museum. Now, I do not have this. I took a picture of it while I was in the British Museum. I took a lot of pictures. I need to go back and take more. There's so much there that the average Christian would benefit knowing what was there and getting to see the tremendous. I saw Artaxerxes' wine bowl. I mean, the whole set had been found with Artaxerxes' name inscribed around it, and that would have been what Nehemiah would have served the wine in. Now, we don't have Nehemiah's fingerprints on it, but if Nehemiah served wine to Artaxerxes, and we've got one of Artaxerxes' silver wine bowls, the whole wine set, there's a good possibility Nehemiah handled it. Now, we do have, are you ready for this? We don't have a seal from Jeremiah, but we have found Baruch, his scribe. We have found a seal of Baruch's from that time period where Baruch, who did all the writing for it, was one of his scribes. And on the back of it, or on the side of it, when he pressed it in, there's also a fingerprint. On the back of a bulla, if it's sealed like a document, there'd be lines. Like if you rolled it up, there'd be lines from, we'd say, the paper or the parchment or the papyrus on the back of the bulla that it was pressed against the paper. But also when you pressed in your signature ring, or if it wasn't always a signature, sometimes it would be on a necklace, you just press it in, you'd get a fingerprint on the side of it. And we have Baruch's, Jeremiah scribe's, fingerprint as he pressed it, if he's the one who pressed it in. Now I've got some bulla, and when you zoom in on it, you can see a fingerprint on one of the bullas. Now the ones I've got are no one cares. They're not important. They're when an archive, a library in any city, burnt, and usually they do sometime after a period of time. Everything's torched, and all the bullas are glazed and fall to the floor. So when they discover an archive or a city library, or where they kept the documents, who owned what property, who the inheritance, whatever, the court records, those are all gone. But all those bullas, whoever sealed them, they're all there. Now, a lot of these days we don't know who they are. There's their signature, there's a little image, and it's pressed on there. And so I've got a couple of those, and one's got a finger. This is a tablet of Nebuchadnezzar. It's called the Babylonian Chronicles. There's all kinds of information recorded on these, and it wasn't until the late 1800s, I think it was 1857, I think, right around there, they broke the code. They knew these things are something. These are something. And then finally someone broke the code and realized now they're reading it. And this is Nebuchadnezzar's account of the destruction of Jerusalem in 586. It's I don't want to say exactly, because you've got the account of the Bible, the book of Chronicles, telling you about it, but you know the date, you know the events. This is Nebuchadnezzar saying similar, the same thing. He's not all about Jerusalem. It's just he mentions that he burnt Jerusalem, conquered it, did these things to it. In fact, it says, captures Jerusalem, recorded on an official Babylon document, records his reign during the year 605 to 595 on clay tablets. And this records that Jehoiakim, king of Judah, surrendered Jerusalem in 597. So this is the 597 surrendering of Jerusalem when Jehoiakim handed it over. And then there's another one that actually has the destruction, 586 destruction of Jerusalem. So I mean, it's the same date, same place, same time. And that is a cuneiform. Now, this looks huge, huge. My gosh, you have to carry this thing like, how many people take to carry this? Well, I'll show you. Now, there are huge, and when they were public displays, there'd be huge, monuments, stones. But when you're going to be running with, like right here, write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets so that a herald may run with it for the revelation of points and appointed. You've got someone that's supposed to run with this message. And so it can't be huge. It can't be huge. It's going to have to be, and here we have right here, these are authentic. These are real. These are from 1900 BC. This would be from the days of Abraham. These are actually cuneiform tablets. Now they're difficult to read. You can see the inscriptions, but this is a tablet. And they would hold it in their hand, and they'd have a stylus, which would be a wooden pen, and they'd press, and it'd have like a little triangle on it. And as they press the different shapes in there, and you can see the lines on this. There's two of them right here. This one, you can see it's written on both sides. It's even got some writing on. This one's got some writing on the edge, right here also. Yes, right here. This one's got writing on the edge. You can see it right here. Right there. I'm not sure if that's zooming in right there. There's another one right there. But these are authentic from 1900 BC, 1700 BC, right in that time period, from Babylon before Moses. Now again, if people would have known this in 1850, that whole liberal movement of the Bible wasn't recorded because there's no writing, wasn't developed, this diffuses that entire argument. But this is probably similar somewhere in here when it says write on a tablet. Those are tablets, and that is the writing. Now, that's cuneiform. We're going to assume that Habakkuk's going to write it in Hebrew. So we've got Hebrew writing on parchments or animal skins. We've got Hebrew writing on ostrakhan. Is he going to write it on tablets just like this? Nonetheless, that's what that's referring to. So that's just interesting. To see. I'll bring, when I get a chance, I'll bring some more, and maybe by the time we get to chapter 2, I'll bring some more in for you to see. Maybe bring the bula so you can see the actual bula and see the little lines on the back. But again, writing, and when they're talking about writing here in the Bible, we know they're writing on scrolls, they're writing on parchment, but they're also, when it says tablets, I mean, he's talking about the very things that the Assyrians and the Babylonians were recording documents on. He's telling Habakkuk to write on a tablet. And so here we go on chapter 1, or I should say page 1. I'm going to just introduce this first lines here of the book here with some statements. It says, this book is very similar to a psalm of lament. And this is important, a lament. This is like the book of Lamentations. It's a cry. It's a sad song. It's a funeral dirge. It's over. There's no hope. It's a sad, sad song. And so this would be a lament. We got Psalms writing laments. You got some Psalms I've got listed there. This book is similar to a lament, and the language that is being used in it matches Psalms 1 or Psalms 10, Psalm 13, Psalm 22, Psalm 74, Psalm 80, Psalm 88. And what's interesting is this book, chapter 3, ends with an actual lament that gives you instructions on the rhythm, the melody, how it's supposed to be played, and on what instruments it's supposed to be used. So the fact that this sounds like a lament or a song, a sad song, is enforced by the fact that at the end it talks about what kind of music it is and what kind of musical instruments are supposed to be used with that. And so this is definitely a sad song. It possibly would have been sung or was written to be sung by the people during the destruction, while these things were happening, or even afterwards, was to be sung. 2 times Habakkuk addresses the Lord concerning the conflict between evil and justice. And this is what he's writing. And this is important for us, no matter where you're at in history, no matter where you're at in your life. You see evil in the world, you can find evil in the world, and people like to say, what's that? Karma, right? Karma. Is that what they say? Karma, where you get what you deserve. Karma comes around. What goes around comes around. Sometimes you see evil and justice manifest. And that is one of man's responsibilities, is, especially in government, is to evaluate evil and bring justice. It's like, that's part of man's responsibility, is to provide justice when you can deal with it. A lot of times you can't. A lot of times you don't have the authority. A lot of times you don't even know where it came from. You don't have enough information, and so you just got to let it go, or you got to wait for further information or investigate. But there is this idea that everyone struggles with. In fact, this is one of the things the atheists always go with, and it's got to be answered. The Christians got to answer. You can't just stick their head in the sand. If there is a God, why is there so much evil in the world? It's almost like that ends the argument for most atheists. It's like, I've seen evil and injustice in the world. If I was God, I would not allow it. So there is no God. Well, that answers the problem. That is as if right now, again, this book is one of the answers to this book is as if everything that's happening right now needs to be dealt with right now. It's got to be right now. Take care of it. And God is like, whoa, we got all the time in the world. In fact, we've got all of eternity to take care of this. So one of the perspectives is, as you step into this, Habakkuk is, look, right now, we need to take care of this. I mean, that's my life. I mean, I want to take care of it right now. I mean, I want things resolved during my lifetime, if not quicker. Where God steps back, it's like, whoa, Habakkuk, slow down. I am from eternity. So I'm going to give you some information. Write this down on a tablet. Give it to a herald so he may run with it, because it's going to take place. We are going to balance the scales. Everything is going to be taken care of. But not when you want it done. Not when you demand it. I'm in control. Relax. And so this is a big problem, and it always is philosophically. Why is there injustice in the world? And actually, the fact that there is a God who's from eternity and is existing for eternity, that answers this question very well. Why is there injustice in the world? It's like the answer is, well, there's not. It's going to be. You're not seeing it. You're seeing it right now. You're not seeing the entire picture. And so Habakkuk, of course, is looking at his culture and asking, why is this going on? And when are you going to put a stop to it? Why do I got to continue to live in injustice? And God gives him an answer. And Habakkuk doesn't like the answer and challenges him again. And God responds. And one thing I point out here, notice God is not sending, he doesn't send bolts of lightning at Habakkuk for asking questions. He sends him what? Revelation. He sends him information. He gives him insight. He doesn't give him what he wants. I mean, people want these things. They want the bolt of lightning, or they want the answer. I want the answer. I want it fixed. Or judge. And God is right here in the middle. He's going to give you an explanation. He's going to give you revelation. He's going to give you something, not necessarily the complete answer, but insight. He's going to give you insight so you can have and you can trust this, and you will have then faith. In fact, this is the book that you get the great verse from. The righteous, or the righteous will live by faith. I stumbled on that. The righteous will live by faith. Paul picks it up. James picks it up. But the righteous will be righteous by faith. Because you are not going to get all the answers. Sometimes you get an answer, sometimes you get a part of the answer, sometimes you get a little peek behind the curtain so you can keep on going, but you don't have everything. You've got enough information, enough insight, enough of a peek behind the curtain to trust it, to realize there's something solid here. I don't know this, but I do know this. Those things that are revealed belong to us and to our children. Moses said, the things that are not revealed, the things that are hidden, belong to the Lord. So this part right here, that is revealed, belongs to us, and it's enough for the righteous to have faith. If you are righteous, you'll trust this and have faith in it. These things over here, no one knows them. They belong to the Lord. And then you've got over here the bolt of lightning. Why don't you just destroy Habakkuk? It's like God doesn't destroy. He doesn't get mad at Habakkuk because Habakkuk is saying, I want to know more. Because actually, it's an act of faith. I want to know more about what God is going to be doing. How is God going to handle this? Stop asking me questions, son. And he hits him with a bolt of lightning. You don't see that. You see God responding every time. Jeremiah went after him. Isaiah went after him. Prophets, Peter, they all came and asked questions. I don't understand. Increase our faith. Teach us how to pray. God will give you some. But at the same time, we also have prophets like Daniel and John, the apostle. At the end of the revelation of Daniel and the book of Revelation, what are they doing? They're still asking questions, and they're told, no, go your way. No, you're not going to see this. No, go your way. You've got insight. And so this is what we've got. And we have got, again, Habakkuk asking the questions and being given an explanation, and it's supposed to be written down on a tablet so we would have it. Again, here it is, written about 606 BC. This would be about 20 years before Jerusalem falls. So realize, we are 20 years away from Jerusalem falling. If this is 606 BC, Jerusalem is going to fall in 586 BC. That is a 20-year gap. So we are, in a sense, halfway through the fourth generation when Habakkuk writes. He is looking at a culture. Again, if this is me just making a suggestion, This is not like a slam dunk, I'm a prophet, I've got all this great insight. But if we are indeed in the final generation, and if it began in 2001, ends in 2040, we are at the halfway point. We are in 606 BC, waiting for 586 BC. And we are right here. And so what Habakkuk is going to see is going to be, and his complaint is going to be the things that we're seeing and the complaints that we're going to have, either have or we're going to have in the next few months as it continues. I've got the captivities. The first captivity was 605. So right after 606, if this was the time, in 605, that's when Nebuchadnezzar defeats Necho at Carchemish and finishes off the Assyrians and comes all the way down through Jerusalem and turns back to be crowned king when that Nabopolassar dies in 605. And that's when Daniel is taken captive. So Daniel is in Jerusalem in 606, bright young man, great future. Within a year, him and some of his young friends are taken to Babylon, not as slaves, but to be trained as ambassadors. That's where Pharaoh Necho came from. Pharaoh Necho had been taken by Ashurbanipal back to Nineveh to be trained and was put back on the throne. Daniel was taken, all the royal children were taken. Why? To cut their thumbs off and make them suffer? No, to train them to become, in this case, Babylonians. Pharaoh Necho was trained to be an Assyrian. Daniel was going to be trained to be a Babylonian so he could possibly go back and not necessarily be the king, but be one of the administrators and serve. It'd be like if China got into our government today and was taking people over to China to be trained for their propaganda and then sent back into our government to be our government's leadership. They wouldn't be Americans, they would be Chinese. They would look like Americans, but they would speak for the Chinese. That's what Necho did for Ashurbanipal. That's what Daniel's intention was, Nebuchadnezzar's intention for Daniel to send them back. In fact, his grandfather, Manasseh, or not his grandfather, but Josiah's grandfather, Manasseh, had been taken to Babylon and then sent back with that very intention. And so again, you can imagine, hypothetically, possibly people that are in our government today, if we are at this point right here in our culture, that are trained Russian agents or Chinese agents that are really serving it. So you could tell if they are actually doing that, because all the decisions they make would make no sense to the Americans, but would make complete sense if they're actually sent here by the Chinese. They'd be like, oh my gosh, now I understand what's going on. Right. We're not being ruled by Ashurbanipal or Nebuchadnezzar, we're being ruled by the Chinese. It's like, and you're in the midst of the fourth generation. It's like, how is this happening? Well, it's been coming. We've been saying it for years. Anyway, got off track there. Josiah had been killed in 609. His two sons had followed him, Jehoahaz in 609, but he was quickly taken to Egypt. So after Josiah is king, he's killed Josiah dies in 609. So you've lost this king, Josiah, the good king is dead. Then Jehoahaz is king for just a few, after 3 months. And then Necho takes him down to Egypt to train him as an Egyptian, to be an Egyptian king, but he never returns. He never comes back. And he was put in place, after him, when he was gone after 3 months, Jehoiakim was put on the throne. This was Jehoahaz's first son. Jehoiakim was his second son. And Jehoiakim is put on the throne. His name was originally Eliakim, but his name was changed by Necho when Necho placed him on the throne. So you can see, you've got the Assyrians trying to rule Jerusalem. They being defeated by the Babylonians. Egypt is trying to replace the leadership of the Assyrians and get a king on the throne for Jerusalem. And Nebuchadnezzar defeats the Egyptians, Necho, and now Nebuchadnezzar takes Daniel and his friends back to train them. So everyone's trying to get their king on the throne in Jerusalem. It'd be Assyria, Egypt, or the Babylonians. Jehoiakim was the vassal king for Egypt and paid heavy taxes, took the money. Jehoiakim works for the Egyptians. While he's put on the throne, Jehoahaz was taken down there. His brother was put on the throne, and his job was to send us the money. Send the money to Egypt. And it's like, well, what do we need to do? He's got to tax everything. He's got to tax the citizens. He's got to tax the business. He's got to take money from the priest. Where the Egyptians want money. money. So everything Jehoiakim is doing is taking and abusing his people to send the money down to Egypt. Because if he doesn't, he's in trouble with the Egyptians. So the people are in 608, 609, 606, when Habakkuk is writing, the people are under tremendous pressure from the government, because the government has been sold out to Egypt, and they're all working for the Egyptians. But the Egyptians are under tremendous pressure, because here comes Nebuchadnezzar in 605 and finishes them off in Carchemish, and they're all running back. So now, by 605, there's nothing left. There's nothing left of the Egyptians, because they're being defeated by the Babylonians. Jehoiakim realizes, I'm paying all my money to the Egyptians, but Nebuchadnezzar is going to come. So now it's like you're paying all your money, you're working for China, but then about the time you're working for China and everything looks like you're going good and you're becoming the elite, Putin comes in on the backside and says, we just defeated China and now you work for me. Yeah, but we've got all these dealings with China. It's like, oh my gosh, who do we work for now? You're under extreme international pressure. And so here's what happens. Point B, Jehoiakim heavily taxed the people, the middle class of Jerusalem, as in 2 Kings 23:35 says, quote, here it is, 2 Kings, Jehoiakim gave the silver and the gold to Pharaoh. For example, Congress gave the money to China, or they gave pellets of money to Iran, or fill in the blank. But he taxed the land to give the money according to the command of Pharaoh. He exacted the silver and the gold of the people of the land from everyone according to his assessment to give it to Pharaoh Necho. So everyone got their taxes, what do you call it when your taxes get looked at? Audited. Everybody got audited and found out, wait a minute, your property's worth a lot more than we thought. Congratulations, your property has just gone up in value. We're going to need to tax more. And so their taxes are being audited, their property value is going through the ceiling. It's a great time, except all your money that you get goes right back to the government, which is shipping it to the favorite nation, or the nation that they're working for. That's happening in 2 Kings during Jehoiakim's reign. This is the culture Habakkuk is living in. In 605, after Nebuchadnezzar defeated Necho at Carchemish, Nebuchadnezzar made Jehoiakim his vassal. So once Carchemish, Nebuchadnezzar returns up to Carchemish in 605, defeats Necho, chases him all the way down to the border, and now Necho is got all this gold and money, but he's trapped in his country, and Necho stops, Nebuchadnezzar sends his general and says, bring some of these kids back, and says, tell the king, you start sending us money. What, I can't send it to Egypt? No, you don't send anything to Egypt, you send it all to us. And that's where it says in 2 Kings 24, in his days, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up, and Jehoiakim became his servant for 3 years. Then he turned and rebelled against him. So he's serving Necho, taxing the people, tremendous, auditing them, evaluating their property, taxing them, and sending everything down to Egypt. And while he's getting all his cushy, his elite status all set up with Necho, all of a sudden Necho's defeated by Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar storms by and says, you work for me. Oh my gosh, what? Okay. And now he's sending all of his money to Nebuchadnezzar for 3 years. And then he says, I think Necho's making a comeback. And he then says, I rebel against Nebuchadnezzar, stop sending the tribute, started sending it back to Egypt. And that's when Nebuchadnezzar comes in 597 and defeats the city without burning it down, and takes Ezekiel in the second wave of captives. This poor Jehoiakim doesn't know. The good news is, just like Josiah had a prophet standing right beside him the whole time, Jehoahaz and Jehoiakim have a prophet just like Josiah did. The prophet Jeremiah is there by God's command, by God's commission, to just stand there and this is what's going to happen. This is where you're at. You're not going to need to worry about the Egyptians. Just cooperate with Nebuchadnezzar, and giving him information. And this is the king that when Jeremiah sends him a scroll, says, read it to me. And it was winter, so when he got done to unscroll, they'd unroll a little bit of Jeremiah's prophet, giving him instructions on what to do. They'd take a scribe's knife, cut it off, throw it in the fire. Unroll a little bit more, read it to him, cut it off, throw it in the fire. It just burned the whole prophecy, not the entire book of Jeremiah, but that powerful prophecy that was sent to Jehoiakim, he burns it in the fire. And then God tells them, they burnt it, you need to write it down again. I mean, you talk about, I've had it happen where your website's all up and running and all of a sudden, or all your videos are on Vimeo, then all of a sudden they're all gone. It's like, oh well, it's done. It's like, no, upload it all again. Oh. Now, I always felt sorry as a kid. I'd read that story and I'd see that, you read the book. As a kid, you look at the Bible, like, oh my gosh, it's a huge book. And my thought as a kid was, Jeremiah wrote the entire book of Jeremiah, sent it to the king, and the king just burns the whole thing up. And Jeremiah's got to go back and write the whole book again. Well, he didn't have to write the whole book; he had to write the prophecy again. And it was tedious, I'm sure. But he had Baruch that was writing for him. But nonetheless, I derailed on that. That's the culture that we're living in at this time with Habakkuk. And Habakkuk now begins chapter 1, verse 1. Here it is. In NIV, the oracle that Habakkuk the prophet received. That's the NIV. If you look on your notes on page 1, it's the oracle that Habakkuk the prophet saw. What we know about Habakkuk is right there. That's all we know. Prophet. I don't know. I don't necessarily think this is the only thing he prophesied. It's the only thing we've got. But what his title is prophet. I think we're safe to assume that he was a prophet like Jeremiah was a prophet, like Zephaniah was a prophet. This wasn't like a one and done. He's out, mowing the yard, and God says, go write this down, write it on a tablet. Okay, why? Who am I? What am I supposed to do? And then they went back to mowing his yard. I think he was a prophet. He wasn't, Habakkuk, the Dairy Queen operator who got a prophecy. It will tell you that. They're saying he was a tree farmer, or he was a this, or he was a that. He was a fisherman. But Habakkuk, his role was, I think, a prophet. So, I mean, he was trained, had some kind of understanding of a prophet. Especially when you see him writing the lament, But nonetheless, the other thing we know, two other things we see in here, the word oracle. Oracle, did I spell that right? Oracle. And also a prophecy, the oracle or the prophecy that he saw. The word is, in the Hebrew, it's the word burden. And this has had quite a bit of conversation, discussion, writing over the many years. But you see point 1 at the bottom of page 1, the word oracle or burden is the word ham-masa. So ham and then masa. What we're looking at here is the word masa, right there. That is the word, it means burden. Ham-masa in our text right here. Masa means this. It means a load, a burden, lifting, bearing, tribute. So it means burden. This word means burden. It's something that you've got to carry. It's a tribute you've got to bring to someone. It's something that you've got to lift. It's something that is a burden. It's a weight that you've got to carry. And it's been used in many times. Figuratively, it is used to refer to an utterance or prophecy. Now again, the word means burden. It means a load. Is your truck loaded? Yes. Now, if your truck is loaded, it's got a load on it, a shipment. You wouldn't say, oh, you mean like, you must be talking about a prophecy. It's like, what's the connection here? So somehow there's a connection because this word, this load, this truckload, this delivery, this shipment, this burden, it means prophecy. It means oracle. It's used repeatedly throughout to refer to something. A prophet receives this load, this shipment, and it's called an oracle. So you can kind of see a couple things happening there. Is you've been delivered this package, and now it's yours to unload. You've got to get it to the store, get it on the shelves, get it to the distribution centers. Or it's a burden. These things are these burden. This word masa is usually in a negative sense. It's usually something that is doom and gloom. It's not like a happy message. It's a burden. And so we can assume this prophet received this burden. It's something that is a load. It needs to be delivered. He's received it. And it's not necessarily something you're going to want. It's like you got a shipment of supplies. Like if Hy-Vee is running out of meat, and all of a sudden the truck comes, it's like, all right, they just got a new shipment of meat. Or if whatever. You're looking at, we're out of this at Walmart. And then the shipment comes in. It's like, oh, we just got a shipment in. It's in the back. You ever ask somebody that? It's not on the shelf. Would you go check in the back? It's kind of like, it's not in the back. If it's in the back, it'd be on the shelf. It's like, if you ever worked in a store, maybe well, when's the shipment? Well, it's going to be tomorrow. Well, maybe it came early. Go back and check. It's like, they don't want to be told that. It's like, my son's working, it's like, no, it's not, if it's not on the shelf, it's not, well, can you go check in the back? All you do, you go back there, come back out. We don't have it, but you got to walk back there for the customer. Well, maybe, anyway, that's something that you want. There's nothing on the shelf, but imagine getting this burden. It's not something everybody wants. It's negative. It's a load. The shipment has come in. We're putting it on the shelves. The store is open. No one wants it. It's a burden. It's bad news. It's like putting stuff on your shelf that nobody wants to buy. And now this is the problem. That's the typical ministry of a prophet. Next, it says saw. Something that he saw. The word there is saw. It means to see or behold, which is interesting because it means to see with the eye, to look on intensely, and it's used to refer to a prophet or seer. Used many times in many different ways, but it talks about a prophet or seer seeing something in an ecstatic state. When he sees something spiritual, something like in a vision form. So it's safe to assume that this is a prophet by profession, by training, and he's going to have a delivery. He's going to receive a message. It's a message that nobody wants. It's not what we came to the prophet to hear. When I come to the prophet, I want to hear something good. When I go to church, I want to hear something useful. This is not useful. Right. It's a prophecy. It's an oracle. It's a burden. It's like, well, I ain't going to go to this church anymore. I'm going to go somewhere where they give me what I want. That's exactly what they said is going to happen. Where the itching ear, there we go. They're saying what I want to hear. No one wants this delivery. They want something that scratches their ears, something that tickles their ears. And then it's something that he saw. It would be some kind of a vision, some kind of an experience that he's with God, like John in the Revelation saw things. Daniel saw things. Ezekiel saw things. Isaiah saw things. He's going to see something, and it's going to be some kind of an encounter with God, some kind of a revelation or vision. I've got the word saw being used in Isaiah 1:1, the vision concerning Judah and Jerusalem that Isaiah, son of Amos, saw. Ezekiel, son of man, they are the house of Israel. They of the house of Israel say. Watch this. In Ezekiel 12, they're talking about a whitewashed wall. That they've got, the religious leaders have got this whitewashed wall. It's flimsy. It's going to collapse on them. And all they've done is just paint it to look good. It's a terrible wall. It's collapsing. It's coming in. Quick, put some paint on it. And so God is making fun of them because they just it's collapsing. It's a disaster. Well, we just painted it. How does it look now? Well, he says, son of man, Ezekiel, behold, they, the house of Israel, say, the vision that he sees is for many days from now, and he prophesies of times far off. So they want something relevant. When they hear Ezekiel is in Babylon with the captives. After 597, the captivity has already begun. They're now not 20 years from the destruction, they are 10 years from the destruction. The destruction has already began, and they are in captivity. And Ezekiel is saying, this is not good. This is what the Lord says. You didn't listen to Jeremiah. You're not listening to the prophets that God had. Now here we are. Now I've got to talk to you here in captivity. And they say, Ezekiel, no. Now this is how it works. Once things unravel, see, if people aren't listening now with 20 years to go, just imagine in 10 years how alert they will be. Well, let's go to the Bible. In Jeremiah's day and Habakkuk's day, Zephaniah's day, no one's listening. And they're like 10 or 20, 30, 40 years out. Just imagine now if the disaster actually began and a large portion was taken to Babylon and a prophet was called, now speak to the people. Say, now do you understand? God is going to destroy Jerusalem. And what would the people do? They'd say, you know what? It's so clear now. We heard this 40 years ago, 30 years ago. In fact, Habakkuk said it 20 years ago. But now that it's begun to happen, it's so obvious. Well, let's see what the people said. B, point 2b. Son of man, chapter 12 of Ezekiel, behold, they of the house of Israel say, the vision that he, Ezekiel, sees is for many days from now. He prophesies of time far off. No, Ezekiel, don't realize. You're prophesying, I understand. But it's not about us. You're talking about days in the distant future. You got to have some insight into what you're saying. You're not talking about us. This is in many days in the future. They're 10 years out from total destruction while they're in captivity. And they're rejecting the prophet, saying, it can't mean us. I mean, it can't be talking about us. It must be many years into the future. Therefore, God says, say to them, thus says the Lord God, none of my words will be delayed any longer, but the word that I speak will be performed, declares the Lord God. In other words, okay, we're 10 years out. Let's just start knocking this thing out. Ezekiel 13:6. Thus, okay, the point there, I've got the word sees underlined, okay? Ezekiel 13:16. Thus will I spend my wrath upon the wall and upon those who have smeared it with whitewash. And I will say to you, the wall is no more, nor those who smeared it. The prophets of Israel who prophesied concerning Jerusalem and saw visions of peace for her, when there is no peace, declares the Lord. This is that whitewashed wall that's collapsing, and the prophets would see, it looks like disaster. I mean, these are trained prophets. I mean, there is a school of the prophets. They're trained to prophesy. Elijah and Elisha, they had trained. Maybe Jonah was trained by Elisha. There was a school of prophets. It included being trained musically. It included being trained to go into song to receive messages. That's why, for example, Elisha called for a harp one time. Come play some music. And then he began to prophesy. You can see this in Saul's day, when the prophets came and they began to prophesy with their musical instruments. So these people were trained. So now you've got prophets that are looking at the prophecy God gave them, and it's bad. It's like Habakkuk. It's like Jeremiah's. It's from the same time period. It's in Ezekiel's day. And they see it. Instead, they whitewash it. They whitewash it. And that's what it says right here. Thus I will send my wrath upon the wall and upon those who have smeared it with whitewash. I gave them the prophecy. They whitewashed it. And I will say to you, the wall is no more, nor those who smeared it. The prophets of Israel who prophesied concerning Jerusalem and, right here, saw visions of peace for her when there was no peace, declares the Lord. They're looking at the prophecy, and it's like, yes, you know, if you kind of squint your eyes, it looks like God's sending peace. I saw peace. What'd you see? By golly, I saw the same thing. Loud mouth or 2 or 3 witnesses, a thing is confirmed. Peace, peace unto you. It's like God says, Habakkuk, would you take a look at that? Oh my God, that's not good at all. That sounds like what Jeremiah's been saying. It's bad, it's bad, it's bad. And Ezekiel's seeing the same thing. But these guys are whitewashing. It's like looking into the Word of God and going, well, that's not, people won't want that. Oh, wait. Here's some hope. Here's some things that are positive. It's like, yeah, that's not what that says. That sounds pretty serious. Anyway, they were doing that. Same thing, Balaam saw. Same word is used there, he saw. So, that's chapter 1, verse 1. The oracle that Habakkuk the prophet received. Oracle, the burden. Habakkuk's a prophet, probably trained. And the word received in the NIV is the word saw. He saw some vision. Other prophets are seeing it and they're whitewashing it. Others are saying it's for a distant future. Others are denying it. Habakkuk is seeing it and it freaks him out. So here it is, chapter 1, verse 2. Here's what he's going to say to begin with. He says, chapter 1, verse 2, the 3 verses. How long, O Lord, must I call for help? But you do not listen. I don't know how you want to read this. If you want to read this in a prayerful voice or like a praise and worship song, or if you want to read it like a man who's like in halfway through the 4th generation and all chaos is breaking out, and I don't know what's going on. That's the way I would read it. How long, O Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen, or cry out to you, violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrong? Why do you... See, he said, you're tolerating wrong. I would fix it. But Lord, you're tolerating it. You're saying it doesn't bother me. It bothers me. Am I more righteous than you? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore, though law is paralyzed and justice never prevails, the wicked hem in the righteous so that justice is perverted. What are you going to do about it? And then you got the Lord said, look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed. Basically says, and the Babylonians are going to come. So let's go ahead and look at this. We're running out of time to do a good job of this, but I'll try. We may have to clean it up next week. Chapter 1, verse 2 on page 2 of the notes in the English Standard Version. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear, or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Right here, you've got these words happening here. He's saying, I'm crying for help. I'm saying help, but you do not hear. The Lord is not hearing. I'm crying, you're not listening. I'm crying, you're not responding. I'm being active. What's your problem? And again, I think you can see some accusation here. And you say, well, that's not Christian, that's not right. That's faith. I mean, when you run to the end of your understanding, and if a person knows a little bit about Jesus Christ, they can live for about a day and a half without running out of information. It's like, this doesn't make sense anymore. This is the seed, sower sows the seed. The seed is sown, they're saved, but they have no root. They run into problems. They don't understand. Or something deceives them. What they need to do is keep learning, because as soon as you understand Christianity, this makes sense to you, it's got to. When you understand a certain amount, you can live and have peace. I understand this. Okay, very good. And then all of a sudden, whoa, I don't understand this. This makes no sense. You've got to make a decision. Are you going to go to God and say, I was trusting you. I thought everything was going to make sense now. This doesn't make sense. Well, it does from eternity, but your little brain, your little bit of experience, I don't understand it. So you stay in the Word. All of a sudden, oh, okay, now it makes sense. You get a little more information. Or some people get that far, this doesn't make sense, I'm done. They're the ones that had no root. They got burnt up by the sun. Or they get choked by the weeds. But those who keep coming back and saying, okay, I accepted Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. I understand I'm going to heaven. But I'm still having trouble with sin. Or I'm still having trouble with this. Or this doesn't make sense. I shared my faith and everybody's making fun of me. This doesn't make sense. I don't want anything to do with this. I'm done. Or it's like, God, why is this happening? Well, read the Bible. You read a little bit and it's like, oh, I understand. I've got a sin nature. I'm saved, but I've still got a sin nature. I understand the world doesn't want the message. They don't understand it, so there's going to be persecution. I'm going to struggle with sin, and not everything's going to work out because I've got to live by faith. It's like, then I'm 61 years old, so I'm a Bible teacher, so I don't deal with this anymore. All the time I do. I've never been 61 years old before. You understand? I figured some things out when I was 21, 31, 41, 51. But a lot of that stuff is useless for me now because you need to be 21 or 31 or 41 to use it. Now I'm 61 and I'm like asking different questions. It's like, this doesn't make sense. Christianity must not be true. It's like, wait a minute, let me read this all again. And now I'm reading the same verses I read when I was 21, 31, 41, 51. I'm reading when I was 61. It's like, oh. Now, it wouldn't make any sense to me from that perspective. But you understand, you keep growing through it. Nonetheless, Habakkuk is in that position. He said, I'm help, but you're not hearing. What's going on? And God is going to answer. And then he says, how long, O Lord, must I call for help, and you will not listen, or cry to you violence, and you do not save, or the word is deliver, right here. And this is our word, violence. That is our word, Hamas. Right smack dab in the fourth generation. Violence. And we need deliverance. We are in a society surrounded with Hamas, violence, social. And if you read the rest of these verses, there is social injustice. Nothing's fair. The law is paralyzed. There's violence. And we need you to save us. And God is going to say, yeah, I'm not. I'm actually going to destroy you. What the heck? I'm calling for help. You haven't been listening. I say we're surrounded with violence. This is social injustice. And what are you going to do about it? Well, I'm going to destroy you. Everybody. It's like, what? And so Habakkuk is like, at the end, it's like, he doesn't say, I give up. It's like, I don't understand this. And God is going to give him more insight. So we got to clean this up next week. The word Hamas, I want to give a good detail of that, but I do want to point this out. Go to chapter 1, verse 3 on page 3. Why do you make me see iniquity, and why do you idly look at wrong? I'm looking at iniquity and I recognize it, but God is idly looking at wrong. Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. Chapter 1, verse 4. So the law is paralyzed and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surrounds the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. You've got right there, you've got a series of words. Go in verse 3. You make me iniquity, wrong, destruction and violence, strife and contention. And these words are coming in groups. So I think where's my list at? Is that over? Yeah, point 2, page 3, point 2. First of all, point 1, why? Habakkuk cannot understand the Lord's lack of response. He's just saying, why is this happening? Why is this happening? And then he gives this list. Now you can see, we'll build this again next week in better case. 3 word pairs describe the society. A, iniquity and wrong, which is perverted justice and social oppression. His society has perverted justice and social oppression. Destruction and violence, the unjust oppression of the weaker members of the community. And then strife and contention. Because of this injustice, nothing works out. No one knows what they can count on. There's going to be strife and contention, or anger and dissension with conflicting positions, with uncompromising wills. So people are being oppressed. People go for help. They're going to go and want answers. They're going to want results. But now we're talking about society. The answers they get are zero. There's only what we'd say people with opinion. They're not going to answer. They don't want to answer your question. They want you to have a problem. So their answer is zero, or actually they're going to allow this injustice to happen because someone's making money. Remember, Jehoiakim sending money to Egypt, and then he's going to switch and send it to Babylon. And so the government's not doing anything. No one's helping us. We cry out and no one's helping. And so now you're going to have these wills of people coming against, if it be the middle class against the elite, and now there's strife, and now they're going to court, and there's going to be lawsuits. We saw lawsuits in Hosea and Amos. There's lawsuits in that 4th generation. They take people to court. This isn't right. When they get to court, there's people with the elite, and they're going to then pervert justice, and there's going to be bribes. The decision is already made. You cried out for answers from the government. The government didn't help you, so you go to court. And what's going to change when you go to court? It's the same people. They're going to stop any kind of results there. And so as he says right here in chapter 1, verse 3, why do you make me see iniquity, and why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me, strife and contention. And that strife and contention is not just over between family members at the supper table, or at the grocery store because they got your cart in the way, or your cart scratched my car. That strife and contention is going to go all the way through society up to legal action. And then here's the results right here, chapter 1, verse 4. So when you go to court, nothing happens. So the law is paralyzed. I mean, there's the law. We've got laws, but all of a sudden the laws are frozen. They don't move. If you do this, this is the law. But all of a sudden, we did this. And the law is like crippled. The law doesn't move. The law is paralyzed, and justice never goes forth. We can see we got the case. But the law says this. Right here, that's the law. But it doesn't work. And so, nothing happens. There's no justice. The guys that are doing all this bad stuff, they never get stopped. And we're not talking about, muggers and people robbing and stuff like this. We're talking about the elite. They're dominating. So the law is paralyzed and justice never goes forth. Watch this. For the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. So the righteous are the ones saying, wait, we need some help here. But the elite, they've got it. They surround them. They surround them, meaning it's the government, it's the courts, it's the priests, it's the Levites, it's the prophets, it's anyone with power. It's like, and so right there it says, so justice goes forth perverted. Oh, they handed down a decision, but that's not the right decision. the person that was complaining up here that was losing everything, they're the ones that in the court, they get penalized. It's like, what? I was looking for justice. Well, you shouldn't be looking for justice. We're not going to deal with that. And so the best thing, once again, as Zephaniah says, the prudent man keeps quiet in such times. And so we'll build on that a little bit more. But that is what Hosea is looking at. That should look similar to anyone in the middle of the 4th generation cycle. It's like there's nowhere to turn. Help, help, help. It's like nowhere. And when the decision does come down, it's perverted. The courts are going to take action. Oh, no. First, it's better if you're inactive. We've made a decision. No, don't tell me. And it's absolutely the wrong decision. Why? Because who's in control? I mean, in this case right here, Necho's in control through Jehoiakim or then Nebuchadnezzar, and they're not even working for the people. They're working for powers outside, and Habakkuk's going to God saying, what are you going to do about this? And God's going to say, I'm going to bring in the Babylonians. We'll pick this up next week and continue. Father, do thank you for the truth of your word. We ask again that we would hear it, that we would understand it, that we would be able to grow in faith and not just stop and be stunted, but be able to grow and understand little bits more of your information, that we may expand our faith. Even though we do not understand everything, we do understand that you are the just God, that in time you will deal with all these injustices and you will be the fair judge. Father, do ask that we would again be a light to this generation, that we would not just come across as negative and hopeless, but actually positive in the sense that there is a greater hope than anything we can find here in this earth. We ask that we may understand that truly, not just to have it as a doctrinal point, but to be able to actually have a hope in our future glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you for your time.